Welcome back. I'm ESL teacher Lisa. Today we're going to talk about 7 tips to speak better. And these tips really go for any language. Of course, we're focused more on English on this channel. And this is based on a video that Steve Kaufmann did. He is a polyglot, and that means he speaks multiple languages. So we're going to do something different today. You're going to practice your listening. We're actually going to talk about some of those key points, but in a podcast form. So the voices are from AI, but it's very, very good. So you can practice your listening. There is a study guide that's linked below if you'd like to follow some of the main points and see the summary of the podcast. But podcasts are a great way to practice sustained listening, where it's not just a 2-minute conversation, but how well do you do in a sustained conversation, meaning 5 minutes, 10 minutes? Can you listen carefully and get a good percentage of understanding? And so it's up to you to judge how much you can understand.
Hey everyone, welcome back. Today, we're going deep, like deep diving into 7 tips for speaking better in any language.
Ooh, fun.
I know, right? We're going to be unpacking a YouTube video by Steve Kaufmann.
Oh, yeah, I've seen him.
Yeah, he's a polyglot, learned tons of languages.
Impressive.
Super impressive. But get this. He's getting ready for a trip to Turkey, and he's still feeling those like pre-trip jitters about being fluent.
Really?
I know. He's even admitting to messing up verb conjugations.
Ah.
It's kind of comforting to know even the pros have those moments right.
Definitely makes him relatable. And it actually sets the stage for his first tip, which might surprise you. He says pronunciation isn't the most important thing.
Wait, really? I feel like I've spent years obsessing over accents.
I know, right? But Kaufmann says clear communication is way more important than sounding like a native speaker. He actually shares stories from his international business days, where people had super strong accents, but it never stopped them from closing deals.
Oh, interesting. So it's more about getting your message across clearly than having perfect pronunciation.
Exactly. And here's where it gets interesting. Kaufmann says if you focus on getting the intonation right, the individual sounds will often fall into place more easily. Think of it like the music of the language.
Oh, okay. So like you can hum along to a song in another language, even if you don't know all the words.
Precisely. And one of the best ways to naturally absorb those intonation patterns is by shadowing native speakers. Listen and repeat, trying to mimic their rhythm and flow.
Got it. So pronunciation isn't everything. What's next on Kaufmann's list?
Well, this one might seem a bit more obvious, but he says to obsess over words. Vocabulary is key.
That makes sense. It's like the more words you know, the more you can express, like having a bigger set of Legos to build with.
Exactly. And Kaufmann has an interesting take on how we learn new vocabulary. He says you don't need to memorize every single word right away. Just keep exposing yourself to the language. Read, listen, watch, and let those words sink in naturally.
So it's more about repeated exposure than intense memorization.
Exactly. It's like how AI learns language. By being fed tons and tons of data, your brain does something similar. You might not be actively trying to memorize every word, but with enough exposure, those connections start forming in your mind.
So ditch the flashcards and just dive into the language.
Pretty much. And speaking of things we might want to ditch, Kaufmann's next tip is all about letting go of those stressful grammar drills.
Oh, thank goodness. I've definitely had those moments where I'm like trying to remember a grammar rule mid-conversation, and it completely throws me off.
Yeah, it's like hitting the brakes when you're trying to drive smoothly, right?
Totally.
Kaufmann believes that over-relying on grammar rules can actually make you sound less fluent.
Interesting. So what's the alternative? Just absorb grammar by osmosis?
Exactly. Just immerse yourself in the language and let those patterns sink in naturally. You'll start to internalize the rules without even realizing it. And this leads us to Kaufmann's next point, which is that grammar is more of a description than a dictator.
Wait, what does that even mean?
Well, think about it this way. Have you ever heard someone say, I would have went?
Yeah.
It might not be grammatically correct.
Yeah.
But it's pretty common, right?
Yeah, actually, I hear it all the time.
Exactly. Or how waiting on now often means waiting for.
Right.
Languages are always evolving, and grammar rules are just attempts to describe how people actually use the language. They're not set in stone.
So I shouldn't stress out about memorizing every single rule.
Not at all. It's more important to understand the logic behind the grammar and how it functions in real-life communication.
Okay. That's actually really liberating. That's actually really liberating. So we've ditched pronunciation obsession, embraced vocabulary love, and chilled out about grammar. What other gems does Kaufmann have for us?
Well, he has this interesting idea about focusing on key usage patterns. He says every language has these core patterns that once you master them, unlock fluency way faster than memorizing endless rules.
So it's like finding shortcuts in the language.
Exactly. And get this, he actually used this approach himself. He said he learned Russian using a book that focused on just 52 key patterns.
Wow, only 52. That's kind of mind-blowing. But how do we even find these magical patterns?
By paying close attention, you have to become a language detective. Notice which words tend to go together, how sentences are usually structured. It's like cracking a code, but a really fun one.
Okay, I'm up for the challenge. So we've got pronunciation, vocabulary, grammar, and now these cool usage patterns. What else is on Kaufmann's fluency checklist?
His next tip might seem a little counterintuitive. He calls it circling back.
Circling back, like going back to things we've already learned.
Exactly. He says you'd be amazed at how much deeper your understanding becomes each time you revisit material, even basic lessons. It's like revisiting a favorite hiking trail. You notice new details every time, even though the path's the same.
I can actually relate to that. I've definitely had moments where I've gone back to like an old textbook or language app. It's like, oh, wow. I understand this so much better now.
Right. And Kaufmann himself is a big believer in this. He mentioned he still reviews basic Turkish mini stories, even after months of studying, and always finds new insights. So don't feel like you're wasting time revisiting easier stuff. It's actually super valuable.
Okay, so it's not just about learning new things. It's also about deepening our understanding of what we already know. Makes sense. What's Kaufmann's final tip for speaking better?
This one's huge. And I think it's something a lot of us struggle with. He says to embrace your mistakes.
Oh, man, this is so important. I know I've been guilty of letting fear of messing up hold me back from speaking.
It's so common. But Kaufmann is adamant that speaking confidently, even with errors, is essential to progress. Perfectionism, he says, is the enemy of fluency.
It's like if you're always scared of making a mistake, you'll never actually get comfortable speaking right.
Exactly. And what's really cool is that Kaufmann is super open about his own struggles. He admitted to making the same mistakes repeatedly in Turkish.
Wow.
It makes you realize that even someone as experienced as him still messes up.
That's actually really encouraging. So it's not about avoiding mistakes altogether. It's about seeing them as part of the process.
Exactly. Each mistake is a learning opportunity. And this actually ties back to Kaufmann's overall philosophy about language learning. He sees it as a journey, not a destination.
I love that. So it's about enjoying the process, the ups and downs, the aha moments, and yes, even the mistakes.
Absolutely. And that brings us to a really important question that Kaufmann poses. And I think it's something we should all ask ourselves. What brings you joy in language learning?
Ooh, that's a good one. I think sometimes we get so caught up in the goal of fluency that we forget to actually enjoy the process itself. It's so easy to get caught up in hitting milestones or reaching a certain level. But if you're not having fun along the way, what's the point?
Exactly. And I think Kaufmann's approach is such a refreshing reminder that language learning can be this joyful, engaging experience, even when it's challenging.
Yeah. I was like, we need to shift our mindset from, ooh, I made a mistake to, okay, what can I learn from this? Turning those stumbles into stepping stones.
Exactly. And when we focus on progress instead of perfection, the whole journey becomes so much more rewarding.
So let's recap what we've learned today from Steve Kaufmann's wisdom. First, we can ditch the pronunciation pressure. Clear communication is king, and intonation is our secret weapon.
Love it. Second, we're embracing our inner word nerds. The more vocabulary we have, the more fluently we can express ourselves. And remember, it's not about cramming. It's about consistent exposure.
Third, those grammar drills. We're tossing them out the window. We're all about absorbing grammar naturally through lots of reading and listening. And fourth, we're remembering that grammar is a description, not a dictator. Languages evolve, so those rules are more like guidelines anyway.
Right.
Fifth, we're on the hunt for those key usage patterns. Our fluency shortcuts to navigate any conversation like a pro.
Yes.
Sixth, we're going back to basics, revisiting familiar material to deepen our understanding and solidify those neural pathways. It's like giving our brains a good workout.
I like that.
And finally, we're embracing those inevitable mistakes. They're not failures. They're proof that we're learning and growing.
So remember, language learning is a journey, not a destination. Embrace the challenges. Celebrate those small wins. And most importantly, enjoy the ride.
And to echo Kaufmann's question, what brings you joy in language learning? Find it, nurture it, and let that joy fuel your journey.
That's such a great point to end on.
That's a wrap for today's deep dive, everyone. Until next time, happy language learning.